Hello there, kind BookTube viewer. I hope you're doing alright. I come back today with another tag, and I'm going to be doing the A tag. This tag was created by Jim over at Jim's Books, Reading and Stuff, and I was very kindly tagged by Mark over at Book Time with Elvis. As always, I'll link the original video, and also I'll link Mark's video down below. So the first prompt for this is, A is for America. What do you consider to be the great American novel? And yeah, for me, I guess it's a bit weird, a bit of an outsider. I'm not an American, as you can probably tell by my accent. But I've read some Hemingway, some Faulkner. I've read Flannery O'Connor and Carson McCullers, a little John Dos Passos. But yeah, I think Hannah's books, she put in The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison as a contender, and I probably agree with her. That's definitely a contender for the great American novel, and I don't know, I guess I'm not really the best judge for it because I'm not American. I haven't grown up in America. I don't really know. Well, I have a bit of a window through literature into what the American experience is like, but I haven't necessarily lived it. And so, yeah, I wasn't totally sure, and my honest answer for this is more of my gut reaction of what I think the great American novel is. And for me, I mean, not only is it like my gut reaction for what the great American novel is, but it is also just a great American novel, and that is The Great Gatsby. Is here in a little sort of combined volume with The Last Tycoon. Is that it? Yeah, The Last Tycoon, by Fitzgerald. And yeah, for me, I don't know, just the themes coming up in the book, and even all the the negative stuff. I don't know. It kind of helped me understand some elements of America, particularly in the 20th century. And it's, I don't know, I suppose it is a filter that you see America through, because it is so iconic now. But I would say that maybe partly why this is such a gut reaction for me of being the great American novel is perhaps because obviously with F. Scott Fitzgerald being a white male, his reputation, his, I don't know, worthiness for being in the canon is kind of pushed up the ladder a bit, or at least has been more in the past. And so hopefully I want to be able to say that in the future more people's gut reaction for the great American novel will be something like The Bluest Eye, or some other book that hasn't been written yet. I hope that's the case. Then the next prompt, number 2, A is for arc. Which character in literature has the most interesting character arc? And I'm sure I've probably read books with characters with more interesting character arcs, but for me I just kind of went straight to Shakespeare when I thought of this, and I've probably forgotten way more from Shakespeare plays than I remember, which probably means I need to be doing some rereading at some point soon. But yeah, again, my gut reaction went straight to Benedict and Beatrice in Much Ado About Nothing. And at least for me, the first time I read that play, it was almost a shock for me that they end up together at the end, because they hate each other so much at the beginning, and it is really funny, and I just loved their banter, and the fact that the banter eventually dies down into a kind of silence and marriage was kind of baffling and quite interesting. But then I got sort of thinking of sort of some more Shakespeare plays, and in a kind of meta way, I find Prospero from The Tempest, I find his character arc to be quite interesting. It kind of begins with pride and his kind of need for some kind of revenge, and then by the end he's humbled and he's throwing away his books and he breaks his magic staff, and I think I've heard it said in a few places that in a way this section could mirror Shakespeare at the time he was writing this, so that, The Tempest is towards the end of Shakespeare's career. I think possibly the last full play he wrote, but I don't know, he might have written a full play by himself after The Tempest, but it's coming towards the end of his career at least. And this speech in which Prospero is kind of renouncing his magic and his pride kind of could be seen as Shakespeare kind of saying farewell to the theatre, saying farewell to his writing, his magic, which fascinates me and kind of moves me every time I read or hear that speech at the end of The Tempest. And next up, there's a bit where I guess Jim was showing off his pet beagle Abby, because quite a lot of people had asked him apparently, and then Steve Donahue interpreted that as show us your pets. So I will. So I've got 2 pet rabbits. They live in a hutch just outside that window, which you can't see, but I'm pointing to that window anyway. And yeah, I have 2 rabbits. They're called Maddie and Leaf. So Leaf is named after the Viking explorer Leif Erikson, and then Maddie, although she's a girl, Maddie is kind of short for Maddock, which is the name of a Welsh sort of explorer prince, a legendary explorer prince. Yeah, so Maddie is the brown one, Leaf is grey. They're not too fond of cameras, so they're a bit shy in this clip, but here they are. Hello? This is a camera. Yeah, I know, it's very strange, isn't it? Yeah, it's okay though, it won't eat you or anything. And yeah, maybe in the future I might try and film a video out in the garden and have them running around, and they might be a bit more comfortable. You might be able to see them again, so yeah, that would be nice. But on to the next prompt. 3, A is for Australia. What was the last book you read by an Australian author? And to my shame, I can't say for sure that I have read a book by an Australian author. I went through a list of famous Australian writers, and yeah, I don't think I'd read a book by any of them. There are a few I'd want to read in the future, and one that I know for sure I will be reading later that year, and that's Peter Carey. I'm reading Oscar and Lucinda this autumn, but other than that, there's the poet Les Murray. I've never read a full collection of his poems, might have only read a couple of his poems here and there, but yeah, to my shame I've never actually read a book by an Australian author, so hopefully that'll change. Prompt number 4, A is for Austen. What do you plan on reading for #JaneAustenJuly? And again, I probably won't absolutely commit to participating in Jane Austen July, but hopefully, I haven't totally decided, but hopefully I might try reading Sense and Sensibility. This is one of the few Jane Austen books I haven't read so far. I read Emma earlier on this year. I didn't totally love Emma, but the first Jane Austen I read was Northanger Abbey, and then I read Pride and Prejudice, which I loved, and then I also read Persuasion, which I think is my favourite Jane Austen so far. So yeah, I've seen adaptations of Sense and Sensibility, but yeah, we'll see how I do with it this summer if I get around to it. Number 5. A is for automobile. What is your favourite literary automobile? And I was kind of scratching my head with this one. I don't think I've really read too many books with a famous car in them. at least not one that springs to mind. Although I brought up Gatsby earlier, and I suppose there's a famous, an integral part of that plot involves a car, and there's a bit, I guess, earlier on where I think there are some people trying to drive a car that has like a wheel missing, or like, or at least the yeah, like it's a flat tyre or something like that. It may even be the same car which is involved in the incident later on. I can't remember. But yeah, that's the only one that's sort of sprung to mind. Then next up, number 6, A is for anonymous. What is your favourite book or poem published anonymously? And yeah, I had a couple of ideas for this. I decided to go with book and poem. And so for book, I guess it is a sort of ancient text. It's, and again, I think I've brought it up fairly recently. It's the Tyne, so it's an Irish myth, and it's got, I guess, the kind of famous Irish hero Cuchulainn in it, and he's basically fighting off an entire army single-handedly after they've sort of invaded someone else's territory to steal a legendary bull, and it's a bit crazy, really violent, but yeah, for sort of anonymous sort of older texts that I've read, this one really sticks in my mind. And then for sort of an older poem, there's an early modern ballad called The Unquiet Grave, and I'll just read you a bit of it. Here it is. Yeah, and I just really love this little ballad. I'll read you the first few stanzas. The wind doth blow today, my love, and a few small drops of rain. I never had but one true love, in cold grave she was lain. I'll do as much for my true love as any young man may. I'll sit and mourn all at a grave for a 12-month and a day. The 12-month and a day being up, the dead began to speak. Oh, who sits weeping on my grave and will not let me sleep? And yeah, it's just a great little ballad that you know, essentially is about, I guess, coming to terms with loss and grief, and learning to move on, even if it's the corpse themselves who has to tell them that. But yeah, it's just one of those great kind of slightly sad but yeah, quite moving little ballads that I've come across. So the 7th prompt is A is for autobiography. What was the last autobiography that you read? And again, this was another where I was scratching my head a bit. I don't read too much autobiography. I read a fair bit of non-fiction and biography, but yeah, I couldn't really think. So I found a few things that kind of go near there. The closest that I could think of was this. It's The Journal of a West India Proprietor by Matthew Gregory Lewis. So Matthew Lewis is probably better known as the author of The Monk, which was a fairly famous sort of horror gothic of the early 1800s, I believe. Now, obviously, West India Proprietor is a slightly guarded way of saying plantation owner or slave owner, really. And essentially, at some point in his life, someone in his family died, and he ended up inheriting a plantation that was worked on by slaves. And these are his journals of going over there and inspecting it, and getting to know what life was like on a plantation, on a slave plantation. And I can't exactly remember. I can't remember where he sits on it. You know, I don't think he's really looking to subvert it. I don't think he's really looking to make conditions better. And I think he does kind of gloss over things a bit. But nonetheless, you know, it is a text that we can refer to at least get some of what it may have been like, although there are other texts and probably better texts that tell us what it's like. But yeah, this was the first one that came to mind. There are a couple of others, this isn't really an autobiography, but I read Rings of Saturn by, was it W.G. Sebald? I read this back in December, and I suppose it kind of has elements of memoir to it that are kind of autobiographical, that's not a word, autobiographic elements in this, but to say it's an autobiography, yeah, it isn't. But then, again, another book that I'm hoping to read soon, again, not actually an autobiography, but it's Knausgaard, A Death in the Family. I'm not sure whether I'll end up reading the whole series, but I've got the first book and I'll just see what I think, I suppose. Though apparently there's a kind of change in tone as it goes on. But yeah, we'll see what I think. But yeah, I'm going to have to step up my game and read some more autobiographies, I think. But then the last prompt is for audiobook. Do you consider listening to an audiobook as reading? So I think my answer will be no to this. Not that I won't knock listening to an audiobook. I think it's great. I don't do it that much myself. Though I used to share a room with my brother, and when we were kids we used to listen to Doctor Who audiobooks before, well, as we were falling asleep, and I can't remember the name of it now. It was one that was set in ancient Rome. It was really good, and we must have, the Stone Rose, that's what it was called. And we must have listened to it, you know, hundreds of times before I actually picked up the physical book and read it, and found out that the audiobook was abridged. But I sped through it because I knew it so well, kind of back to front. And then whenever there was a bit that had been cut out for the audiobook, I was like, "Ooh, this is new," and it was really exciting. But yeah, at least for me, they're very different experiences. I kind of process the information differently if I'm listening to something or reading something. So I would say it's different, but I wouldn't knock it. I wouldn't say don't listen to audiobooks, and they certainly have their place. And I would be curious to actually listen to more audiobooks in the future. But yeah, for now that's sort of my take on that prompt. So yeah, that's the end. I hope I didn't bore you. I hope I didn't speed over stuff. I am doing this right at the end of the day, so I might be a bit more tired than normal. But just before I finish, I should tag some people, and I got 3 people I'd like to tag for this video. So firstly, I think it's Kate over at Luna Reads, Jamie at Jamie Adds Stories, and also Graham over at The Archive. Yeah, all 3 of you, if you're watching, if you want to do it, please do. I don't think any of you have done this before, so yeah, please go for it if you want to. And also, yeah, for anyone watching this, I would heartily recommend their channels as well. I've had lots of fun watching their videos, and yeah, they certainly have their own interesting things to say. But for now, that's it, I think. I'll probably see you some point later on this week, but for now, take care. Yeah, alright, bye bye. I'm going to sleep.